Hi, welcome everybody. Welcome to Building Inclusive Futures, Advancing Social Justice through Shared Societies. My name is Francisco Segovia. I am a program officer at Club de Madrid, and I will be facilitating the session today. Welcome everybody. Welcome all time zones around the world, because we have people connected from all around the world, from Asia, from America, from Europe and Africa, all time zones. But still, it is the World Day of Social Justice everywhere. It is still 20th of February, so we are celebrating a remarkable day in the calendar, the World Day of Social Justice. I would like to thank to the ILO Global Coalition for Social Justice for providing the frame for this side event. We have coordinated with this global coalition the organization of this event, and I would like to mention that Club de Madrid has been involved in promoting social justice around the world, mainly through its Shared Societies program for some time already. A program running already for almost 20 years that tries to foster and promote inclusive policies, inclusive perspectives, and fostering the participation of minorities. I am wondering how social justice will overcome current geopolitics. I'm wondering if they will get stronger or weaker in the next few years. Even how sustainable development will, or sustainable development pillars will survive to the rejection from some actors, and being some of them economic and political strongest powers in the world. So how social justice and sustainable development will overcome current geopolitics in the long term, time will tell. We will see. But in the short term, in the very short term, I would suggest to listen to our speakers today, because they are going to shed some light on this issue. I'm not sure how much those questions I'm wondering about can be really answered, but I'm sure that our speakers today are going to bring wisdom, the correct ideas, the correct experiences and thoughts to our ears, so that we can reflect on it. So I will introduce our speakers, our panelists. I will start from the last in the schedule of interventions with Rakesh Khanna, Mr. Rakesh Khanna. He's a policy strategist and a social entrepreneur with over 2 decades of experience in inclusive governance and equitable development. His work focuses on empowering marginalized communities through participatory decision-making and grassroots-driven solutions, particularly in post-conflict and disaster-affected regions. His expertise includes crafting inclusive policy frameworks that address systemic barriers to education, livelihoods, and political representation. His current work combines innovation with traditional knowledge systems to foster sustainable development, emphasizing cross-sector collaboration to transform policy into tangible community benefits. Mr. Ali Imran, he is a seasoned lawyer and expert in democratic governance, international cooperation, inclusive development, and human rights law, with over 23 years of experience working with both national and international organizations. His expertise spans key areas such as parliamentary strengthening, effective democratic governance, gender equality, and human rights protection. He has been supporting shared society's perspectives of inclusive and participatory development for religious and ethnic minorities in Pakistan since 2020. Ms. Saista Pervaiz Malik has been a member of Pakistan's National Assembly since 2013, actively serving on committees for climate change, commerce, human rights, and foreign affairs. She was one of the 10 women directly elected to the National Assembly, a significant achievement in the promotion of women's political participation in Pakistan. There, she also served as a secretary of the Women's Parliamentary Caucus from 2013 to 2018, from where she again championed women's rights. Currently, she leads the women's wing of the Pakistan Muslim League in Punjab. As a person and politician committed to education, disaster relief, and social development, she plays a key role in legislative reform in Pakistan and in Pakistan foreign policy discussion. Finally, I will introduce Prime Minister George Papandreou, and after that, I will give him the floor. He's former Prime Minister of Greece from 2009 to 2011, and a distinguished member of Club de Madrid. He has been a member of the Parliament of Greece since 1981 and has served in key government roles, including Foreign Minister from 1999 to 2004. In his career as a politician, he has championed peace, democracy, and international relations, and he managed to reform Greece's political system. Prime Minister Papandreou is a graduate of Amherst College with a Master in Sociology and Development from London School of Economics and the Harvard Kennedy School Fellow in 2012. He remains an active politician and recognized internationally for his work in the promotion of the information society and e-democracy. Prime Minister Papandreou has received several honors for his commitment to promote peace and democracy, as well as for fighting racism. Prime Minister, you have the floor for the keynote speech.
Thank you very much, Francisco, and I'm honored to be with such distinguished colleagues, dear friends, and I have been asked to make an introduction on this issue, which of course will be more putting some problems which we can discuss and questions where we are going. As today is, of course, the World Day of Social Justice, and we're here to not just to reflect on the challenges of our time, but to reaffirm, I believe, our collective commitment to equity, to dignity, and to inclusion for all. As you mentioned, I am a former prime minister. I dealt with, during my time, with the major financial crisis in the world, but also in my country. But I've also been a participant in global efforts for democratic governance. So I've seen it firsthand how injustice, exclusion weaken societies, erode trust and institutions, and obviously suppress even economic potential. That's why I say that social justice is not the responsibility of any single nation, it's a shared global challenge. That's why the Sustainable Development Goals place social justice at their core. But as we approach 2030, we must ask ourselves, are we truly on track to delivering on these commitments? Or are we witnessing a growing divide where too many still struggle to access the opportunities and rights they deserve? And if you look at all the statistics, over the last decade, we have seen, and even more, we have seen deepening divides, both between countries, but also within countries, even in developed nations. So inequality is a global challenge. It persists in every region, whether in access to education, healthcare, decent work, political representation, wealth differences, of course. Millions remain marginalized due to race, gender, ethnicity, religion, disability, or migration status. These are not just moral failures, they are barriers to sustainable development, to economic prosperity, and to global peace. Exclusion, we know, we've seen, it fuels social unrest, it fuels extremism. Lack of opportunity leads to the migration crisis and political instability. We see systemic inequalities which slow down growth, slow down innovation. So we need, again, to recognize that tackling these injustices is not charity. It is an investment in our collective future. And this year is a very, very important year, 2025. It is a global call to action. We have two major international opportunities, which is first of all, the Second World Summit for Social Development. This is a moment to redefine global priorities and place social justice at the center of policymaking. We also have the Fourth International Conference on Financing for Development. And here we must push for financial mechanisms that mobilize resources for inclusive and equitable growth. These, of course, milestones require contributions from governments, civil society, international organizations, and forward-thinking coalitions like which we have, you mentioned, Francisco, between the Club de Madrid, and the ILO Global Coalition for Social Justice. That's how we can create a roadmap for truly shared and inclusive societies. My central argument would be, however, that inclusivity also requires transforming economic and political systems, which we have seen are limiting or developing or creating some of these inequalities. I think the elephant in the room, of course, is what has happened with the change of government in the United States, where the issue of social justice, the issue of climate change, not only are off the table, but are seen as not only irrelevant, but maybe even in a hostile manner. So this, I think, is of major importance. As you mentioned, geopolitics, Francisco. This will be part of the geopolitical world, which will shape, at least in the short run, but the short run can have lasting effects. And it doesn't look like we are going to be seeing a move towards actually making a more just and equitable global economic system. From what I have understood in my life in politics, we have seen through the globalization, particularly in the developed world, some of this has really helped globalized capitalism, if you like, have helped some areas of the world grow. China is one, parts of Asia, in an amazing way, actually, where poverty has been almost wiped out. But at the same time, we have seen huge inequalities grow, even in these areas. And these inequalities are not simply wealth inequalities. What happens is we are seeing also a high concentration of wealth. And at the nation state level, where we had in Europe a social contract, or in the United States what they called the a fair deal by Roosevelt, we had a collaboration, if you like, between employers, employees, and governments, where a capitalist economy allowed for profit, but there was an obligation, a responsibility to redistribute, to make sure that workers' wages, that the environment, that workers' conditions, that education and healthcare were provided for in an equitable way. With the globalization over the past decades and the freedom of capital to move from one place to another, and even hide in tax havens, which I felt when I had the global crisis. Just a parenthesis, I was asked then by IMF and others to put on taxes in Greece. And I said, of course, we will have to raise the taxes to deal with our debt and our budget deficit. However, what we again saw is immediately that the wealthiest could move their money outside of Greece to tax havens, to other places in the world, where therefore we had to put the whole burden of adjustment on the middle class and the wage earners. Highly unjust, and of course, creating huge political and social problems. But this is not the only result of such wealth concentration. It is not only an injustice, which allows for marginalization and people not having access to basic services. It also is a concentration of power. This concentration of wealth becomes a concentration of power. We have just seen it in a very stark way in the United States, where we are looking at a country moving into an oligarchy or a plutocracy, and where people who own wealth have much more of a say. They own not only wealth, but they own media, they own platforms, social media platforms, football teams, and then they use their wealth for lobbying or for corrupt practices in order to buy, whether it's politicians, judges, police, or whatever. This, unluckily, is a phenomenon we are facing around the world. And if we do not see this clearly, and we only understand that we are talking within our institutions at our national level, and look at the trappings of democracy, but don't understand that what is happening now is that power is being concentrated in hands outside of the participation of our societies, we will not really be able to deal with these problems. So we need to see how we are going to prioritize actionable paths forward, looking at economic democracy, where workers and communities have a say in resource distribution, prioritize collective decision-making and mutual prosperity to foster truly shared societies, dismantle power structures that are concentrated, which allow decision-making to the few, and once in a while, every 4 years, the citizens have a choice, but the choices are not always very clear. Democratize economic planning, giving workers, wage earners more control over decisions in production, promote shared governments and participation, make sure that we have redistributive policies and market reforms. I would say remove big money from politics to restore democratic accountability, promote transparency and accountability also in the algorithmic decision-making, which the basically public space is now controlled by these algorithms, but who chooses, who makes these algorithms is another question. The public has no say in that. They are profit-making. They are not built for democratic debate or finding solutions. Often they are there to create more trouble and more hate and more polarization. So we need to reclaim public spaces, both physical and digital, for democratic dialogue, free from dominance and profit-driven interests. And I have, in the Council of Europe, where I also work, made a report on participatory democracy and how we can rethink to make our democracies even more participatory and use digital and AI tape capacities to really give a voice to our citizens. I would add a few more things to advance shared societies, understanding identity-based inequalities. So we do need to continue to address, even though people do not want to do this in some countries, as we see, again, I'm talking about a country where I was born, which is the United States, addressing how race, gender, ethnicity, and economic status intersect with exclusion, challenging divisive narratives that justify inequality. We should learn from success stories, examining policies that have successfully expanded education, healthcare, and labor rights. I see here that we can draw inspiration from experiences both in the countries of Pakistan and in Nepal, and we'll be listening to our speakers from both countries. where innovative approaches to inclusion have emerged, and also some grassroots and local proposals are necessary, because we're looking at the global level, but it's not so easy to think of how we can change geopolitics from one day to another. But if we have good examples, if we have good practices in parts of the world which can come from grassroots and local communities or national experience, this will give the hope, but also the information and the knowledge of things we can do. Ensuring true representation to promote meaningful participation of marginalized communities in decision-making, strengthening, again, youth and women's leadership in political and economic spheres. I know our deputy from Pakistan, Shashta, has been at the forefront of this, and congratulations. And rethinking financing models for social justice, social investment, progressive taxation, debt relief, social impact bonds. These are how we should have new narratives which will challenge all these voices that want to wipe out any sense of social inclusion and justice, and looking at these racial or ethnic or other marginalized inequalities. Our task is to renew global consensus on social justice, push for stronger commitments from governments and international bodies, foster partnerships between governments and civil society, businesses, and global institutions, mobilize our own citizens so that we will have actions that not just talk, but also implement inclusion, so we can actively build inclusive futures. Let me close with some questions just to help the discussions. How do systemic inequalities manifest in different regions? What policies have proven effective? What steps can be taken to increase social inclusion without reinforcing divisions? How can global financial institutions and international organizations better support social justice efforts? And here there's just one other parenthesis. We have to rethink these global international institutions. They are no longer representative of the global population, certainly not the global South. What strategies have successfully ensured meaningful participation of excluded communities and governments? Let's be clear, social justice is not a luxury. It is the foundation of stability, prosperity, and human dignity. We can't afford to stand still. The world is watching. Action is needed now. Whether we're in the global North or the global South, in wealthy or developing nations, we all have a role to play and a responsibility, I would say, for renewed global solidarity. So let's commit to policies that create opportunity, dignity, and fairness, and not just for some, but for all. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Prime Minister. That was a formidable frame for discussion today and for reflection at the short and medium term. Many concepts on social justice and on the social development goals and shared societies were brought about in your speech. Thank you very much. Let me remark or make a remark or make a reference to your mentions to global challenge of inequality and the concentration of wealth and power outside the participation of society. That fuels conflict and then brings a lot of problems. And I would like to see also this problem from the perspective of vulnerable communities and how they are perceiving, in what way they are perceiving this challenge of inequality. This facilitates smooth transit to the next panelist, to the next speaker, Ms. Shaista Pervaiz, who is a member of the National Assembly of Pakistan and country ambassador of women political leaders, who will reflect on advancing vulnerable communities agendas at the political level, at the policy level. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I would like to say, honorable guests, distinguished colleagues, and respected members of Club de Madrid, it's an honor for me to be addressing you people and to hear the valued opinions from our distinguished guests. Greetings from Pakistan. You know, surely we want to build a shared society built on inclusion, equality, and justice. A future where every individual, regardless of gender or religion, ethnicity, or economic status, is empowered, valued, and heard. Inclusion is the foundation of sustainable development and national progress for sure. A shared society ensures that no one is left behind and that every citizen, regardless of their identity, can contribute meaningfully to the social, economic, and political fabric of our nation. I mean, there's no doubt to that. And we are thankful to Club de Madrid for their initiative in Pakistan in promoting the culture of shared societies through peace, inclusion, and social justice for the vulnerable communities. You know, the inclusion of religious and ethnic minorities in the SDGs, reporting like Vulnerability National Review Report 2022 and National Adaptation Plan on Climate Change 2023 addresses the issues. Pakistan has the requisite constitutional, legal, and policy framework in place to address the issue of social justice. The government of Pakistan has already made progress in many areas, that is, legal reforms, justice, and equal opportunities. Equity is a cross-cutting theme across all government policies and programs. However, there is still work to be done. I mean, it is a work in progress. The challenges are that Pakistan is a diverse and multi-ethnic nation, and it faces significant challenges in achieving social justice and inclusivity. Women, persons with disabilities, minorities, and low-income groups often face systematic barriers in accessing education, employment, and political participation, which, while marginalized communities struggle for access to quality education, healthcare, and legal rights. These disparities hinder not only individual potential, but also national growth. Governance issues is the main issue in our country. Undermines efforts to promote social justice and create a level playing field for all citizens. These challenges highlights the urgent need for collective action and targeted initiatives to address social justice issues in Pakistan. And what the government is doing is that SDG 10, reduced inequalities, emphasizes the need to eliminate discrimination and ensure equal opportunities, while SDG 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions, highlights the importance of inclusive governance, human rights, and social cohesion. And we now in the National Assembly of Pakistan has an SDG secretariat which overlooks and see the implementations of these SDG reforms that the government has taken forward. Government of Pakistan, under the vision of our Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, is addressing gender disparities, ensuring minority rights, eliminating economic inequalities, and eradicating discriminatory practices. And just recently, we have formed a gender mainstreaming committee in the assembly also to foresee and to look into detail all the government departments where gender stands and where the minorities stand and where the people with disabilities are have a stand. So the committee is there in place and it has started work. And the government is committed to achieving the sustainable development goals by implementing inclusive policies, promoting social equity, and ensuring sustainable economic growth. By investing in women empowerment, a lot of work is being done in the country for the women empowerment and for minorities and for people with disabilities. The provincial governments are giving interest-free loans for the entrepreneurs to start their businesses, and a lot of work is being done. Civil society organizations and non-governmental organizations have emerged as important actors advocating for policy reforms, providing essential services, and amplifying the voices of marginalized communities. Our religious and ethnic minorities are an integral part of our national identity. The inclusion in governance, education, and economic system is vital for national unity and peace. Economic disparity is a major driver of social injustice. Government and private sector initiatives are being they are being there to have inclusive economic policies such as I mentioned, such as increasing access to microfinancing for women and underprivileged communities. Government of Pakistan reformed the economic policies and made them inclusive. We have a very strong and a very good program, which is for Social Protection Network Program, which is BISP, BISP, known for marginalized people, that they are given a monthly stipend to bring them out of poverty, and with that they can start their businesses, and we ensure that the money gets through the national ID cards, the money is distributed. Legal and policy reforms to build an inclusive society. Pakistan strengthens legal framework that protect marginalized communities. The implementation of existing laws such as the Protection of Women Against Violence Act, Domestic Violence Act, we have Harassment at Workplace Act, and provinces reform in personal laws and policies for transgenders, people with disabilities, and the Minority Rights Protection Act are on our priority. Provincial governments are enhancing representation of women and marginalized groups in political and decision-making processes. It is mandatory to have 33% of women in the decision-making, on the decision-making tables. So that is also a step taken by the government. Gender mainstreaming, as I mentioned, the committee is there to overlook and to see these things. Access to justice, a fair and impartial legal system is essential to protect the rights of all citizens. In Pakistan, a number of judicial and legal reforms are introduced to eliminate systematic discrimination and ensure accountability at all levels. Education plays a great role, and we have legislated it is that all children, across from the age of 1 to 16 have to be educated. Schools and universities can foster an environment that promotes critical thinking, cultural understanding, and empathy. Lot of incentives have been given for girls to bring them to school. By integrating social justice principles into curricula and ensuring diverse representation in learning materials, young generations can grow up with a deep respect for equality and human rights. Programs supporting persons with disabilities can help bridge the gap between privilege and disadvantage, ensuring that everyone has a fair chance to succeed. And I am proud to be associated with the Labard platform, for where we give the poorest of the poor, we give vocational trainings and skills to the vulnerable to ensure socio-economic justice. providing them with skills so that they can be included and they can be brought into the mainstream. Building inclusive futures requires not just institutional change, but also shifts in social attitudes. Public awareness campaigns are very important. Media representation and community engagements initiatives are crucial in challenging stereotype, dismantling prejudices, and fostering a sense of unity. In the end, I would like to emphasize that advancing social justice requires breaking down systematic barriers and promoting mutual respect and ensuring fair access to resources and opportunities. A truly inclusive future is built on shared societies where diversity is valued, equity is ensured, and every individual has the opportunity to thrive. I strongly believe that shared society is the way forward. By working together, government and civil society and communities, we can create a just, resilient, and prosperous world where no one is left behind. I am really thankful to you once again for inviting me, and I look forward to questions, if any. And I appreciate the initiative taken by Club de Madrid. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shaista Pervez, member of the National Assembly of Pakistan. Actually, it is our pleasure to have you on board. Thank you very much for your speech.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing the progress of Pakistan with gender issues, minorities empowerment, and the empowerment of people with disabilities, and the reforms that are being made in Pakistan to empower minorities and women and to counter discrimination. Thank you very much. We stay in Pakistan because now we jump to our next speaker, Mr. Ali Imran. He's a partner of Club de Madrid. He's a friend. He's a senior expert in international cooperation and development, and he's going to focus on the inclusion of minorities' view in the national adaptation plan to climate resilience in Pakistan that we have worked together and promoted and pushed from Club de Madrid as well. Mr. Ali Imran, you have the word. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Francisco, Excellency Prime Minister George Papandreou, Honorable Shaista Pervez Malik Sahiba, Honorable Rakesh Karna, and participant of this seminar. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. It is very difficult for me to speak after the interventions made by Prime Minister Papandreou and Honorable Shaista Pervez, because they have covered so much into their talk that there's a little left. But I would like to congratulate Club de Madrid and ILO for commemorating this World Day of Social Justice, which to me is always a day to think and reflect where we are. Because the challenges we are facing right now are there since long and are yet to be addressed. So I think it's a good day for the reflection as well. Well, we are talking about inequalities and exclusion, discrimination. At the global level, what we see is that there is a very much difference between the issues and challenges. Some of them are common, but there is a great the issues are much greater in the global south, because global north has its own challenges, but global south is much more facing this issue of inequalities and exclusions. Just to mention a fact is that according to Oxfam, the 10 richest person of the globe has more wealth and resources than 3.1 billion citizens who are on the below side of economic empowerment. So imagine 10 people resources are much more than the 3.1 billion people across the world. So that makes it an eye-opening that still we are living in a world where these economic disparities are there. I would like just to share the Pakistan context, of course, which is again a very challenging context because Honorable Shaista Pervez Malik Sahiba has just shared some of the highlights of Pakistan's perspective, the challenge we are facing, and some of the steps which are being taken to address that. But Pakistan is a country of 250 million, where a major part of our population is living on the both side of poverty. We have around 10 million people belonging to the religious minorities in Pakistan. So, and then we are also a debt stressed country where our spendings are, our income is lower and our spendings are much more on running the state affairs. So it is very difficult for the state to like take out resources and to spend it on that. But I would like to thank and appreciate Club de Madrid and Slivka Foundation for their support to the vulnerable communities in Pakistan. I remember when we started this work back in 2017, supporting some of the gender inequalities in agriculture sector in Punjab, and then in 2020, because that was the time when Sustainable Development Goals we were having frameworks to implement those sustainable development goals. But the challenge we faced at that moment was that the vulnerable communities, the religious minorities, the ethnic minorities were not that much a part of planning, development, and implementation of sustainable development goals in Pakistan. So we took the challenge, and we, together with our local partner, Aurat Foundation, we start having that consultation with Ministry of Planning, Development and Reforms, special initiatives, to include vulnerable communities in SDGs implementation and reporting. I'm happy to share that in 2022, when Pakistan presented its voluntary national review report at New York, our effort were materialized, and our consultations process, which was like there was a cross-country consultation process with religious and ethnic minorities. So that resulted that one full chapter of Pakistan's voluntary national review report was on the religious and ethnic and other minorities. So that was a success from that. But that was the same time when we had a huge, a massive disaster in Pakistan in 2022.
Climate.
Yeah, Pakistan has is vulnerable to climate disasters. We had earthquakes, droughts, floods. So in 2022, we have excessive rains in two of our provinces where 33 million citizens were affected, and these majority of these 33 millions were the poorest of the poor and most vulnerable communities. So that led us to think about SDGs related to climate change and climate adaptation. So we start working with our local partners, with the community leaders, with our champion like Ms. Shaista Pervez Malik. So we start working with them and bringing those voices of the vulnerable communities to the preparation of National Adaptation Plan 2023. So we had countrywide consultations on that, and resultantly, in 2023, we have a National Adaptation Plan, which was approved by the cabinet of under Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's cabinet that was approved. And I'm happy to share that that National Adaptation Plan has one full subchapter of 4.6, which talks about the adaptation priorities with regards to vulnerable groups, which includes women, youth, and religious and ethnic minorities. So that was a great success. But as Ms. Shaista Pervez Malik Sahiba has mentioned, that we have the constitutional frameworks, we have the national legal frameworks. And now we have the policy frameworks as well. At the global level, we have the global frameworks as well. But still, why these inequalities are not being addressed, are not being it's not being responded well, is something we need to think about. Just to give an example, we have a very once these uh, religious and ethnic minorities view were prioritized in the National Adaptation Plan, we started consulting again with the religious and ethnic minorities of how to implement that plan. And we come up with a charter of action, which we presented to the government of Pakistan to implement that. But at the same time, if I could reflect on a simple fact that we have a beautiful plan, but the implementation challenges are still there. For instance, unfortunately, that like only 0.03% of our public expenditures goes to climate response, which is one of the major challenges in the country. And there are some bilateral programs by the international community. So we have like around 297 million, sorry, 346 million USDs in our Green Climate Fund and Global Environment Fund. So we are having that from there. But there is a long way to go. So the policies are there, the frameworks are there, political will is there. But I think these inequalities has to be addressed in a longer way. Just to share some of the way forwards, our recommendation, I would like to echo what Prime Minister Papandreou and Ms. Shaista Pervez Malik has said, that first and foremost thing to me is empowering those vulnerable communities, and that empowerment can come through their political empowerment and economic empowerment, because these are the two major challenges which these vulnerable communities are facing. So first thing is to empower them and providing them those avenues and opportunities and that conducive environment where they can excel. The second thing which Prime Minister Papandreou has already mentioned is addressing the systematic inequalities, because that's where this challenge lies, because some of these biases, discrimination, exclusion, these lies with the systems of the various countries around the globe. So I think it's very important that we address that systematic inequalities. Education and awareness is the third thing which we need to work on, because what we have done through our Shared Society initiative in Pakistan is educating and awareing the communities about the need and importance of including vulnerable communities in planning, implementation, and reporting of sustainable development goals in Pakistan. And that realization at the community level and that realization amongst the policymaker is something which is key. Economic redistribution, which again Prime Minister Papandreou has mentioned about that, I think that's one of the things which is very important at this moment, and that is, as Ms. Shaista has said, that is providing that kind of right kind of technical education, providing jobs, having tax justice. I think that's also very important in context of Pakistan, and access of the vulnerable community to the resources. Combating the discrimination is important. So this has to be done not at the framework level, but in our everyday social life as well. Climate vulnerable communities are the most vulnerable to the climate changes. So the climate justice across the globe and climate justice within within a country is something important. And finally, I would like to emphasize, and that's where I would like to appreciate Club de Madrid as well. It's that we are advocating and lobbying for global cooperation and partnerships to respond to these challenges. The social justice cannot be ensured by a single effort, by a single country, by a single system, but it's global responsibilities. And as Prime Minister Papandreou has mentioned, social justice is not a luxury, but it's a fundamental right of every citizen across the globe. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ali Imran, thank you very much for your speech. Just a thought. how important is to achieve a document like the national plan, the national adaptation plan to climate change, but how many challenges come afterwards. Implementation requires funds, requires the efforts of the administration. So a very good document of Pakistan as the National Adaptation Plan will have to face now the challenge of implementation. That's a good idea to understand how to focus on social justice. We jump now to another partner and friend of Club de Madrid, Mr. Rakesh Karna, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Policy Studies, Study and Governance in Nepal. And he's going to make a presentation on inclusive perspectives in Sustainable Development Goals that he has directly been working on in the last periods. Mr. Karna, your floor.
Thank you, Francisco. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. Prime Minister Papandreou, Madam Pervez, and Mr. Imran. I feel a bit of sigh to really speak after, you deliberated all those important facts. So allow me to share my shyness with the PowerPoint presentation. Thank you, Club de Madrid, for this extraordinary opportunity to share the panel with such an intellectual group of experts around the globe. So this is the case study of how Sustainable Development Goals, global goals, are implemented in Nepal in terms of inclusive perspective. And before I begin, I think it's important to recall the context when we adopted SDG. So back in 2015, when we adopted, we had a quite interesting power struggle to endorse a new constitution in the country at the time when Nepal was dealing with post-earthquake reality. So that was the context, and we adopted SDG. We had the midway review, and we stand at 95 out of 167 list of countries in terms of where we are. If we compare our performance regionally, we are 0.6% better than the regional average. And if I recall the status against SDG target in percentage, we have achieved or are on track for 28% of indicators. And we are having a very limited progress in about 44% of indicators. And in 28% of indicators, the situation is worsening. And the beautiful thing of Nepal and those in the policy making is, if we can't make a goal, we shift the goalpost. So what we have done is we have reduced the indicator by 150. So this reflects where we stand. In line with the social justice, there are certain, all goals are important, but primarily I believe that goal 1, poverty, gender, goal 5, 10, inequality, and 16, inclusive institutions. These are the primary or driving goals for this purpose. So we are having moderate progress for gender and poverty. We do not have any information about inclusion, goal 10. We don't have any information other than stories. So we don't know how we are performing. And then the situation is stagnating for goal 16. So that's where we are in terms of Nepal progress to SDG. So let me begin. As I said, poverty reduction has been an important part of our achievement. It declined to 16.7%, but then the recent government data shows that when we change the narrative of how do we define extreme poverty line or national poverty line. 20% of national population live below poverty line. So that's 1 in 5 people in Nepal are living below poverty line. We have a pretty good economic growth rate comparing to our neighbors, 6.8%, but then the distribution of this economic growth are very much confined to a limited circle. It doesn't really reach to underprivileged population or region. So that's the question for us to ask. We also have some good achievement about maternal mortality rates, but there are geographic issue, cultural issue, language issue, which affects marginalized people access and benefit from these achievements in maternal mortality. Girls' school enrollment is one of the exemplary progress we have been able to achieve. But then, given Nepal has 123 linguistic groups, those not belonging to the dominant culture and language, they really struggle to keep the pace with their fellow school friends. The challenges are not new. If we compare our challenges in terms of SDG realization, I think we have to go back to MDGs before 2015. So some of them continue. So one, as Madam Parvez recalled about inequality, structural inequality. So I think Pakistan and Nepal, a part of South Asian country, have this structural inequality or drivers that we try to trim the branch rather than dealing with the roots. So I think we have the same situation here. Despite all those changes, 20% of Nepalese people on top, they hold 40% of national income. And then this is just income. We don't have data about wealth. So wealth inequality is quite stark comparing to the income inequality. The discrimination based on caste and geographic limitations also affect people access to services and opportunity. Another significant challenge we are facing is the lack of disaggregated data. So we talk about, okay, we want to empower these excluded communities and groups, but then we don't know where to start, where to pause, where to reflect, and where to continue, or kind of dismantle the approach. So like I said, SDG 1, poverty, inequality, and governance, these are the core area where we do not have the data. So that's one of the major challenges we are facing. The SDG debate and discussion, decision-making, well, about policy formulation or adaptation, resource allocation, financing, most of these debates are laid and confined at the capital in Kathmandu, with some participation at the provincial hub, but then the subnational implementation or role in the decision making is questionable. And if you look into how the loads of indicators shared, about 2/3 of indicators are the responsibility of subnational government, whereas the national government hold most of the decision making. So that's the disconnect between who makes the decision versus who carry the decision. So that's another issue we are dealing with. Mr. Imran just here about climate and pandemic impact. Nepal is one of the most vulnerable countries. Like you said, sir, Mr. Imran, we also recently have a kind of 20 to 30 years climate adaptation plan. And if you see the resource planning, 97% of the resources are expected to be funded by foreign actors. So this is a kind of disconnect between local reality and donors making all the decisions. So despite Nepal claiming for loss and damage and all those funds, but then there is a complete lack or dire lack of how these vertical horizontal distributions are managed in terms of climate financing. So that's one area. COVID and other health issues really affect minorities, in particular food insecurity and healthcare. So these are not common, like you said, in Pakistan, earthquake, erosion. Few months ago, we had big landslide and flood in Nepal, and you might have heard this has impacted the vulnerable community, especially those who live in this risk zone. So that continues. But then it's not just complete dark, I would say. There are some silver lining as well. The most important is our constitution. So if you see Nepal's constitutions under fundamental rights, there are certain positive measures dedicated to the minority and marginalized. There are some affirmative actions based on caste, ethnicity, gender, like you said, Ms. Pervez, about reservation for women and Dalits and other at the different wings of government. It's not necessarily the decision-making role. I don't know about Pakistan, but in Nepal, they participate, but not primarily in a decision-making role. So that's the kind of area for us to improve. JC, gender equality and social inclusion strategy, has been the core of our constitution policy planning. You also mentioned, Ms. Pervez, about gender mainstreaming. We have gender responsive budgeting. So I think we have embedded at all three levels of federal governance system. We also encourage participatory decision making. We also have some targeted interventions for different sectors of the excluded population, including women. We recently have endorsed our 16th five-year periodic plan, the national plan, which completely aligns with SDGs. It also aims that Nepal will graduate from least developed country by 26, by next year. And it also lay the foundation or the roadmap for achieving SDG by 2030. And I think before I conclude, I think it's important for me to just share with you about the recommendations we are seeing in Nepal in terms of how to capitalize these challenges and how to accelerate SDG implementation in an inclusive way. One way is the decentralized governance, like I say, engage minorities and subnational actors in the decision making rather than at the recipient end. We also need to targeted interventions. One size fits in doesn't really work, so we have to have the customized approach. We also struggle a lot about financing, how to meet these SDG goals. So opportunity like you said, Prime Minister, about this FFT4 or WSSD. These are the platform for country like Nepal to really explore how to benefit, how to leverage the resources. Data equity is another area for us to really invest in disaggregated data system to track how the interventions are really producing the results. So before I conclude, I think I must recall George Orwell's animal quote from Animal Farming that in jungles, all animals are equal, but then some animals are more equal than others. So I think when we talk about equity, inclusion, and so on, it's important. Nepali experiences, I'm also a minority, and so I can tell you that it's not about trimming the branches. Eating the root, changing the root, fixing the system is the need of the day. And it has to be transformational, not transactional. So with that, thank you very much. I pause now for the opportunity, and I look forward to commenting and responding to all questions you may have. Over to you, Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Rakesh Karna. Very complete review of the challenges and opportunities of inclusive focus of social development goals implementation in Nepal. Okay, we are over the time. We have a few minutes for questions. I will try to give the floor to Mr. Emilio Casinello, who is a Spanish diplomat and a close friend of Club de Madrid. If because it seems that he would like to address some words. I'm not quite sure. If not, I will go. No, it seems he's not going to intervene. So we have a question on the chat, and it is a question for Ms. Shaista Pervez. It is a question made by Sharon Thomas. She asking Ms. Pervez, and she was saying youth make up a significant portion of Pakistan's population. What role do you see for young people in advancing the social development goals, and how can we ensure they are meaningfully involved in policymaking and implementation? Sorry, Mr. Vice, you are muted.
The host has, yes. Thank you. Thank you. What I understand is what role the women can play. You know, we have the women in the parliament, we have to see that women get on the decision-making tables. Unless and until they get there, where the decisions are being taken, the things cannot move forward. But now what is happening at present is that we are trying to overlook and trying to place women where they can look into policies, where they can make policies which are beneficial for the women. So it is, I mean, it's an uphill task, no doubt, but work is in progress and we are looking into it. That and first, mostly reforms are needed, and reforms are always difficult and painful and are difficult to accept. But we are pushing away, and we will, inshallah, get what we want to. We are doing work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answer, Mr. Vice. Okay, we have another question. We don't have to whom the question is addressed. I will read it, and if some of the panelists would like to answer, I will appreciate it. The question is, what role do you think private corporations can and should have to advance equality and social justice?
Who is this?
What was the question again exactly?
What role do you think private corporations can and should have to advance equality and social justice? Is the role of private corporations. That is something maybe you, Prime Minister, mentioned in your
Sure,
first
if
address.
I can just say very quickly that well, one hopes that the private corporations, first of all, we can talk about them at the local level, and they can be small, medium size. I assume that in Pakistan and in Nepal, as in Greece, many of the corporations are small, medium size. They, of course, can be very important, and we need to support them for building jobs, for being flexible, resilient, and that I think is what's important for to keep them alive, if you like, in our economies. And luckily, what we are seeing at the same time, and I mentioned this, is the concentration of power, but it also is the creation of oligopolies or even monopolies. So that asphyxiates, that chokes the innovation in the end. It chokes the possibilities of small and medium-sized companies to be able to perform and to be innovative and so on. And even though some people believe in these big champions, in the end, these big champions become so big that they choke even competition. That's one area. The second one is one hopes that these big corporations realize that they have huge powers and that they need to be used in a just way. I would say we need to deconstruct these powers in many ways. There have been discussions from the OECD to the G20. Recently, Brazil heading the G20 has made quite a clear proposal, and the Club de Madrid has been working with them on this, on the issue of a global tax on big corporations, as well as fighting the issue of tax havens. So this, I think, is another area where we would like to see cooperation with these big corporations, because if we look at Oxfam was mentioned by Mr. Imran. It is huge amounts of money are lost, over 500 billion, Oxfam believes, in tax revenue around the world because of these tax havens. So you can imagine that this would be more than enough to fund many of the programs we need to support dealing with poverty, dealing with marginalization, and so on. I think a third is that we need to see that there is a social responsibility. And there are well-meaning leaders of corporations that do believe in social responsibility. But philanthropic help is not enough. We do need structural changes in the economic system. And it would be great if we could do it through cooperation. It would be, in the end, in the interest of those who own these companies also, because we're talking about global climate, global threats. Climate change is one, pandemics are other. They are linked often. The migration crisis. These are all crises that have created big problems, not only in our societies, but also in our economies. So I would say that these are the areas we need to see where they can be important in cooperating with us. And I say with us, with governance structures.
Thank you very much, dear Prime Minister. Maybe we could link this answer to the concluding remarks. I will give you the floor again, Prime Minister, to say a couple of words of conclusion, and that will be at the end of the event. I would like to thank you, everyone, for their participation and for all your thoughts and experience that you have expressed with the different contexts. Dear Prime Minister.
Well, thank you very much. I know the time is short, but I believe, first of all three of the speakers, Saista and Ali and Rakesh, those are the first names I used with first names that they spoke, gave very interesting analysis of the local situation. But then, of course, they also could project this into a more wider issues, which we're talking about, of social justice, SDGs, and globally. The empowerment of women, empowerment of youth, which Shaista mentioned, and the support systems in Pakistan it's a struggle on the one hand, but it also shows the possibilities when you do create these institutions and have these types of policies. In Pakistan also, we have the importance of the National Adaptation Plan, which was mentioned by Mr. Imran, by Ali. I think some of the recommendations that came out both from him and also from Mr. Karna were, first of all, how do we empower economically and politically our societies? And this also has to do with sometimes how we deal with these systemic inequalities, which are both wealth, but they also span the different minority groups, whether they are ethnic, religious, racial, or others. So resources is one. How do we redistribute resources and find the necessary resources? And where do we put the resources? Governance is another issue, which was mentioned, very important. These are also the principles of governance, and Nepal was mentioned that there was a very important constitutional change which embedded issues such as social justice into its constitution. Know-how, how do we get the expertise? And data was also mentioned. It's very important to have the necessary data for policymaking. But I think also very important for our societies is structures that are for democracy, that are inclusive and participative, that make sure that people do have a voice, particularly people who feel marginalized. And of course, when we're talking about this, education and awareness for vulnerable communities, skills in new profession, technologies, and the climate issue, we are seeing that the vulnerable communities are hit mostly. We have, I would say, often a climate apartheid. And this, of course, also needs global cooperation. Animal farm was mentioned. This is a big issue at the global level. Will we have the rule of law, or will we have the law of the powerful? And what I think is really important is we need to see how we deal with inequality. Inequality has deepened inside and beyond between countries. I would just add, in the developed world, as Mr. Imran mentioned, that the developed world had other problems. However, in the developed world, the huge increase of inequalities, let's take the case of the US, but even in Europe, has created the type of political backlash which then scapegoats minorities, migrants, racially different. So we are, or even other countries, such as with the USAID decision on to close down USAID, saying, so these inequalities in these countries have a political backlash that then in the end have huge effects in many parts of the world. I would add to that this is a problem because we are going, as we said, to these two important conferences the UN is organizing. These conferences demand global cooperation. And we are at a time seeing a geopolitics of ultranationalism and competition, if not conflict. So at a time when we need more cooperation, this is the paradox, we are seeing this greater sense of tension between countries. At a time when we need to be more innovative, we are becoming more risk averse because of our fears, because of the type of rhetoric. So I think we have what is the solution? As I mentioned in the beginning, these are not easy answers. I don't have the silver bullet, but learning from examples, from each one's perspective, from the types of problems we have, understanding the systemic problems, I think is one important step to rebuild thinking about how we create a global system which deals with the SDG problems, is much more equitable, much more just, much more participative for our society and for global peace.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister George Papandreou. That was a fantastic wrap of the session. Thank you for these concluding remarks and for your contributions. And also thank you to all the speakers today, Ms. Saista Pervais, Mr. Ali Imran, Mr. Rakesh Khanna, for your amazing contributions. Thank you very much, and have a good day or night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.